Hi, I'm Father Anthony Hannon from Invian Patches. This is to prepare his way. And I thought this would be a good day to go for a walk in the woods and have a talk. Share my thoughts on the crisis in the Catholic Church and the relationship that I see with untreated alcoholism, codependency, and dysfunctional families. In a dysfunctional family, and here I'm just going to take the stereotypical alcoholic family, there are three unspoken rules. They're very rigid rules, but they're not written down. But everyone knows them, everyone learns them. Don't feel, don't trust, and don't talk. Don't trust even your own feelings, your own observations. The image that is presented outside of the home is the most important thing. The truth doesn't really matter. And denial. Denying that there's a problem in the family. Denial that there's any type of addiction. And this contributes to a cognitive dissonance with a person. Everyone knows what the real problem is. They just wish that Dad or Mom or whoever would stop drinking. The alcoholic says, I don't have a problem. And most of the family members will say, yeah, there's not a problem, or they won't talk about it. Oh, every now and then let's take it if it's the head of the family who has a drinking problem. Every now and then Dad might be remorseful at his drunken outbursts. Maybe call a family meeting. Make up some new rules for the family. Say things are going to change now. Or maybe they'll go on a trip or do something. And maybe those things are somewhat of consolation, give some sort of a hope. But what they really want is Dad to stop drinking. That's the real problem. But it's not even addressed, not even spoken about. In the church right now, we are facing a crisis, for anyone who's paying attention. And for the most part, it's presented as a crisis of sexual abuse. It's presented as a problem of sexual abuse of minors and homosexual abuse. That's my dog running by me. You don't see him on the camera, but that's when you hear that thundering running, that's my dog. So that's how it's presented. The solutions seem to be ever more new policies and code of conduct for priests that don't get enforced anyway. It's virtue signaling to the world or to the children of the church, right? Whether they're adults or not, we're all children in the church. And they're supposed to kind of comfort us and say, okay, now none of that's going to happen anymore. When I was in the seminary, a priest had told me, I don't know if there's others present or not, I think there was, that, according to his knowledge, in the cases that were investigated in the, I guess the late 1980s and 1980s and 1990s, that 100% of the cases involved alcohol. I did meet one priest who was convicted of horrendous things. Briefly, it wasn't, I just happened to be there when he was talking to another priest. And the situation was that this priest had served time, and he got help when he was in prison. And he realized that he was an alcoholic, and that he got sober. And when he was speaking to this other priest who knew about recovery, he said, I'm just so happy, I'm just so glad to know what the problem was. I mean, look, obviously that priest had many problems. Obviously that priest had many problems. And not the least of which was his attraction to boys of whatever age, I don't know. But he was also an alcoholic. And when he sobered up, he, the fog cleared. And he committed himself to his program of recovery from alcoholism, which includes rigorous honesty and searching and fearless moral inventories. And although he, left ministry, whether that was mutual or if it was just forced, I don't know. That is, that he wanted to also leave ministry. But, I think he should have left ministry, and he did. But he dedicated the rest of his life to helping alcoholics, and I know secondhand that he helped many, many, many people recover from alcoholism. I don't know how many years had passed. I'm going to say probably 25 years had passed. And then someone came forward and accused him again from something that happened, 30, 40 years prior. And I suppose that victim had not come forward previously, and however that worked, with whether it was with Canadian laws or whether it was because of just that it was released to the press, I don't know. But that man, that laicized priest, he threw himself off a balcony and committed suicide. Anyway, I want to give you a connection between the situation in the church and alcoholism and codependency and dysfunctional families. And for many of you, this is going to seem like it's just crazy. But, and I'm not denying sin. Anyone who knows me knows that I've preached about sin. I continue to preach about sin, personal responsibility, mortal sin, the absolute necessity to go to confession, repentance, and obviously all suffering in the world, it goes right back to Adam and Eve and the first sin. And but when we look at recovery from alcoholism and codependency, one of the ways of doing that is to look at it as a disease. And I don't know everything, but it does seem that when addictions and codependency is looked upon as a disease, then recovery seems to be possible. Anyway, I haven't done a video on codependency yet. I did a video on how addiction happens, very, very basic. But enjoying this walk in the woods. I hope the camera's not shaking too much. I haven't brought the bush mower down here to do any trails, so I'm not sure exactly how far in the woods I want to go here. If we'll make it all the way back to Monk's Pond or not. I don't have my hiking boots on either. Anyway. Codependency was first defined as usually like the spouse of an alcoholic. We would call that person a prime enabler. And the disease of alcoholism, so the addicted person, it's a progressive disease, so it can be tracked in various stages, first, second, third stage alcoholism, for example. It applies to other substances besides alcohol, but then they started realizing that the prime enabler, usually the spouse, had also some typical ways of dealing with it. So they, as the alcoholic would progress or digress deeper and deeper into the addiction, this is like going through the jungle, the codependent would react, adjust. If the husband was the alcoholic, the wife would adjust. Pick up the slack where the alcoholic would prove to be unreliable and unpredictable. Try to cover things up for the sake of the children. So it's out of, the goodness of her heart that she wouldn't tell the children what's really going on. Make excuses for their dad and stuff. Oh, we're getting a little wet here. Vicar, how far should I go? Should I cross here? I think we should go back and... Now you're in the mud. Hey, Vicar. Come on. I got bug spray on. He doesn't. He's in the mud. Okay, let's go back the other way. I don't know. Might take another route. I've got to mark the trails, then take the bush mower through here. I'm following right now an animal path, obviously. It's not obvious to you, but it's obvious to me because I can see. Animals tend to take the same path, as you've seen maybe on my other videos. How did you like that video with the fox at night? Just waiting. He heard some animals, and he took off. And then these two little animals, two beady eyes, two sets of eyes, hop, 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 chasing them. They were raccoons. That was pretty funny. I don't know if a raccoon would fight with a fox or not, but when you come out here, you might be worried, oh, you might see a bear or something, or a coyote. Maybe you want to see some animals, maybe like a we got to go up here. You'd like to see some deer, for example, and but the chances of you seeing an animal like any of those animals is pretty slim. And the reason is because we're too noisy. I mean, I'm talking now, so obviously I'm noisy, but the even just walking through the woods is noisy enough. Okay, where was I? Right. The wife would cover up for her husband, try to protect her children. Eventually they started doing some research on children who live in alcoholic homes. They wanted to see what how they cope with it. Vickers found some more water. There's lots of springs here on this property. Oh my! I took a wrong turn. I'm almost at the highway, which means that's going to be all water down there. I got to go this way. So, anyway, they found that children will fall into one of 4 patterns. And depending on the individual children, and their aptitudes, their natural dispositions, and depending on how many children are in the family, it would they might fall into these quite rigidly and kind of be set for life. I'm probably walking through a patch of poison ivy here. I know I've walked through some thorn bushes and stuff. I know I scratched my shin down there, but a number of people have come up here and gone home with a reaction to poison ivy, and apparently some people are more allergic than others. So, as far as I can tell, I haven't had it. So maybe I'm not allergic. Maybe I'm immune. So the 4 patterns. So typically, and again, like I said, this would depend on the child's natural aptitudes and whatnot. But the oldest would typically fall into what's called the family hero. They're like in some sense, whether there's an addiction in the family or not, these things may also fall into place just with a relatively healthy family. But in an alcoholic home, much more pronounced. So the family hero, you know, they're like a little adult. The prime enabler, that is the codependent parent, would often confide in the oldest some of her emotional trouble, see? The family hero is usually, you know, super responsible, excels in school or sports. The second child falls into what we call the scapegoat. Often the second child cannot live up to the reputation of the first child in the family, the older sibling. And they end up acting up or skipping school or later getting involved with a bad group. Maybe get involved with drugs or shoplifting or something or other, lying. And the focus of the family's problems, they know there's something wrong, right? They know there's something wrong, and this child's behavior becomes the focal point. And they say, well, the reason we're not happy is because of this child. And unfortunately, they often get stuck in that and can never break out of that role. The third child, they say, is the lost child. There's a lot of commotion going on in this family, and this child will make friends with himself or herself with books, perhaps nowadays the internet. I guess there's a lot of lost children around these days. Hope I don't get lost in here. I left my, I don't have a compass with me, and I left my wristwatch at home. I just thought I didn't want to wear it, but the wristwatch helps you to know which way south is. It's a beautiful sunny day, and you just point the hour hand, the short hand, to the sun, and then halfway between that and 12 is south. And the property runs, well, the highway runs east-west, see? So you just head south and you're going to hit the highway. And anyway, now that the foliage is on the trees, it's hard to see where I'm going. I'm just kind of walking through the forest, but I know more or less where I am. So, and at least I know this. It's about mid-afternoon. There's the sun, so probably south is that way. Okay. If you see this video, it means I made it out. Okay. Right, the lost child. They get lost. They don't feel like they belong, and they feel very, very lonely. And then the fourth child would be the mascot. You know, this is the young child. The kids are a little bit older by the time this one comes along, and that child gets pampered and often becomes like a class clown or something like that. And so those are the roles. Then they started looking at, well, that's how children respond, how they cope. But what happens when they get older? What happens when they become adults? So studies started being done on adult children of alcoholics. And that is just what it sounds like. Someone who is a child of an alcoholic who's now an adult. I know there was a lot of talk at one time. I think they even did a Simpson episode on it about now I'm following an animal path and my dog. This is going down a big hill and to water. I don't know if I want to go down there because I don't have my boots on, but one way or another I have to. So anyway, right, there used to be a lot of talk about the inner child. You heard of that term before? The inner child. It's beautiful out here, I tell you. I just don't know how far deep into the woods I want to go. I'd love to show you the pond, but maybe that'll be another day. Okay, can you see that path? Can you see there's a path there? Maybe you can't. Anyway, yeah, there used to be a lot of talk about inner child, and I guess it has some merit in terms of therapeutic approach to someone who's an adult, because like I mentioned with the first child, the family hero, that they're super responsible. In some ways they kind of missed out on their childhood, at least how we understand childhood in modern days, at least modern day first world nations like us. So yeah, so the inner child, getting in touch with your inner child, they would say. Anyway, I'm not going to go into detail on that. It's just more useful, I think, to just look at the kind of the common characteristics of adults who grew up in alcoholic homes. So you can look that up yourself. I think they list 13 characteristics or something. It's probably growing. And those characteristics became broadly known as the symptoms of codependency. So the term codependency has broadened to not only the prime enabler, the spouse of an alcoholic, but to all those who are involved, emotionally attached in some way to an addict, to an alcoholic. Amongst the things that come out, or the habits we could say, they're basically coping mechanisms that are learned to survive the chaotic home life, an unpredictable home life. Those things become habits, and then they get carried on into adulthood. That makes sense, right? Another laicized priest, who I don't think he got into any trouble or anything, but his name is Ernie Larson, or Ernest Larson, and you can look his name up, and he wrote back in, I think, probably the 60s or 70s. One of his famous books was called Good Old Plastic Jesus. And then he wrote another book, at least, which was something like, don't just do something, sit there, or stand there. Don't just do something, stand there. Anyway, I think he left voluntarily and sought laicization and got married. And he also was a recovering alcoholic who helped countless people up until his death a few years ago. God rest his soul. Anyway, Ernie Larson coined this phrase, at least this is where I heard it first. What you live with, you learn. What you learn, you practice. What you practice, you become. And that's codependency, as we understand it now. So what type of things? People pleasing. Doubting your own reality, trusting other people's reality. Perfectionism. Control issues, wanting to control. And in general, just a turning off of the emotional spectrum. What did the children learn in the alcoholic home? To not talk about the real issues. To cover up for the alcoholic. What's happening in the church for so long priests doing bad things and bishops covering up for them. Someone gave me a book called Organizational Codependency. I searched on Amazon to try to find it, and I don't know if I can find that book. I think I might have lent it to someone or lost it in the midst of all my tons and tons of books. Anyway, Organizational Codependency. And this was talking about, say for it applies perfectly for the church, by the way, but it's talking about, if you can imagine like a large organization, maybe a corporation, maybe a, government, ministries, and you have various departments and whatnot. So they ask, who's most likely to get promoted? Well, if you have an employee who's showing up early and leaving late, the so-called workaholic, who is very meticulous with his or her work because they're perfectionists, right? They outperform everybody because they're driven, right? This is what is missed. They're driven by a sense of inadequacy, and probably what they learned in the alcoholic home, or how they learned how to cope with it. They're driven, so they're going to be promoted, right? They deserve it, don't you think? So if they get in charge at some level, middle management or whatever, and they're in charge of